So last grass-fed exchange in South Dakota, we had a next-gen producer panel, and it was essentially, as we facilitated, it was a breakout session on Friday, and it ran twice, and it was like real talk. And I don't know how it morphed, but people have just laid out so much vulnerability and so much honesty about what they were struggling with that point. I mean, there were tears, like it was intense, and it was intense both times. And so the Grass-Fed Exchange Board unanimously thought that this panel should be a main stage session, because what are we here for if not to enable the next generation of regenerative producers or energy stewards to be successful. And so we thought we would center the voices of next generation folks. And I'm going to kick it off by just asking each of you to introduce yourself in whatever feels right to you.
Guess I'll start because I'm at the end here. My name is Ariel Greenwood. I used to live and graze in Sonoma County up until about last October, so it's nice to be back home with the green. And I cut my teeth grazing livestock in California about 5 years ago. And prior to that, I was farming for a few years, started when I was a teenager, and I was one of those who watched Alan Savory's TED Talk and was like, I can't not do it. I just got to do it. So I think we all have like a scale, like an actual physical scale at which we're comfortable working with. And for me, working on a smaller garden scale felt too small, partly because I'm very tall and pretty clumsy. And so I gravitated towards grassland and grassland ecosystems for a lot of reasons, but big animals and big ideas and big problems all make their home in the prairie. So I do too. And these days I live kind of seasonally in different places. It's hard to describe a norm. Every time I see friends, they're like, so you're in Texas, or you're in Canada, or whatever. And I've been living in New Mexico this winter, fall through spring, on a couple different cow camps there, working with my partner's cattle company. And we formed an LLC together called Grass Nomads because we are a little bit nomadic in our work. So in about 3 weeks, we'll head up to our summer grazing, which is a couple different ranches in Montana. So we'll be managing some of our own cattle and also working with Cayuse Land and Livestock. Some of you may know Wyatt Donald and his family up there. So that's a collaborative partnership, and I'll talk more about how that's all structured, but a lot of the work that I do, most of the work I do is in the field, and then some of it lately has been kind of consulting and problem solving for farms and ranches that don't really have a context, I'd say, and need to develop one, and are trying to learn how to work with producers in a way that's equitable and functional, as opposed to dysfunctional, which I think is the case on a lot of ranches, new and old. So anyway, and then after this summer, we'll come back to New Mexico for fall works, and then we have some kind of shaky lease situation, so I don't really know where I'll be a year from now, but I know what I'll be doing a year from now, so at least there's that.
Real talk, we do this thing on my team called temperature check-in. What 3 words on how you're feeling right now?
Me?
Yeah.
I feel overly caffeinated, but content.
I feel full but dehydrated.
So real.
Over to Holly.
Well, Wayne Rasmussen said something pretty profound this morning when I was waiting for his bus ride. He said, they put me out to pasture, so this is what I do. So I have enough experience in my life to be out to pasture, but my age dictates that I have the opportunity to sit up here. Ariel, you alluded to the dysfunction of new and old ranches. I'm a good litmus test for that. I've lived through quite a bit of dysfunction and still get to experience that. So I came back to my husband's operation after college. He started his operation He lived and grew up there in South Dakota, north central-ish part. So it gets cold there. For those of you who are come from warm states, that's usually the first question that we get. And in 2000, he was at college. He got a phone call from his parents, said, "Do you want to farm?" He said, "Absolutely. That's what I've done my whole life." And so they said, "Then you need to come home." And so they came home. His parents were in a financial situation. And they said, here's how we plan to fix it. You and your brother can go to FSA and you borrow this much money, and you're going to bail us out, but we're going to call it a different term to make everybody feel warm and fuzzy. And so that's what they did, because we do the same thing over and over and expect different results, because that's how his dad had gotten it a similar way from his grandfather. So away he went from 2000 to 2008. He farmed with his brother in 2008. The soon-to-be Wreck-It daughter-in-law came into the picture and just observed and asked questions. And my soon-to-be husband just all of a sudden kind of said, "Oh, hey, this is always going to be my brother, but that doesn't mean you have to be my business partner." So they had an exit strategy to exit on January of 2008. And in November of 2007, his brother just all of a sudden flew the coop for 6 months, 8 months. Nobody in the family, nobody neighbors, nothing knew where he was. So we kind of pulled that together, pulled out of it, bought his brother out. At that time, it was a negative net worth. Pulled it together and moved forward. We rode through the super cycle, paid a lot of what Dave Ramsey would call stupid tax off, and came out of the super cycle. We had expanded our herd in a lot of different ways. My husband had came home from a grazing school that South Dakota puts on. That's awesome. And he said, "Holly, we got to figure out how to sell the baler and the rake. We got to get rid of this stuff." And so we were so excited to try to figure this out and just really start to dig into the re-energize movement. And as the bank came down harder and harder, it just became very clear to us that it was farm dynamics that met family dynamics, and it really took a toll on my husband's health. And so God kind of just knocked him out for a couple months with vertigo, and he really assessed things. We did a really long, in-depth SWOT analysis, and we came to realize that where we were at was not sustainable, not talking about economics here, people, because we can do a lot of different things with chickens. We just heard it, right? But in a family sense, the kind of stuff that we don't like to talk about it, what did she call it this morning? The wood chips, right? Those are some serious things that we assessed, and we realized that we couldn't move forward. So January 30th of 2018, we had our last farm sale. December 30th, we sold all of our cows. 2 weeks later, we sold all of our hay, and 2 weeks later, we sold all of our farm equipment. And so we lived to tell about it. God was good. He gave us an opportunity, a different operation, 70 miles south of us, and that's where we're at now. And so now we're still working through some of that family dysfunction and getting it organized, but hey, you can live to the other side of it. So it's a little bit about my story.
Real talk. 3 words.
Ooh, 3 words, really? Did you not just hear me spill it, sister?
How do you feel to get that off your chest?
Woo, I don't know, to relive it. I don't know that was that good. Feel blessed and grateful.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you, Christine, for doing everything to make this conference happen and bringing us all together and bringing some diverse faces to this stage. So I appreciate that. My name is Dee Dee Boyce, and I have a little ranch down in Pescadero, California, which is about 2 hours south of here. And I raise 2 breeds of slower growing chickens and heritage turkeys and pigs and ducks, all on pasture. I am we're just starting our 6th season, so that feels like a feat in and of itself. I live there with my wife and my 14-month-old baby. We we lease 62 acres from a land trust, the Peninsula Open Space Trust, land trust in that area. And I sublease my operation uses roughly 15, 20 acres, and that grows every year. And I sublease about 3 acres to a veggie and flower operation, about a half acre to a medicinal herb business, and then about 50-ish acres to a grass-fed cattle operation called Left Coast Grass-Fed. And so by doing that, I feel like all of the land is being managed. It's just not all being managed by me. And it's been a great way to support other new businesses that are starting in our town. And yeah, I'll start there. I feel like we'll dig into the other stuff.
3-word check-in.
3 words, man, dehydrated for sure. I get real nervous up on these, so I know that'll like die down as we keep talking, but yeah, fortunate to be here.
Thank you. My name is Byron Palmer. I'm curious, how many of you guys were on the tour yesterday at our play? Okay, all right, so we kind of know each other. I manage Sonoma Mountain Institute, and I also have a business called Grounded Land and Livestock, Grounded Grass Fed. At Sonoma Mountain Institute, we do regenerative ranching. I wasn't coughing because it's not really regenerative ranching. I just have a cough. But it's not contagious. It's just I'm also dehydrated. Sorry. Yeah. We manage a number of ranches around the county, public and private. We custom graze organic beef cattle, organic dairy cattle. We have a small direct marketing operation, and we do finish small groups of finished animals and introducing self in way. I guess the short version, which I didn't say yesterday, is I'm from the suburbs originally, which is a great way to get into ranching. I also saw an Inconvenient Truth like Nikki this morning and was like, oh man, stuff's on fire. And that's not good. I went to college and was playing sports, and then I got injured, and then I started reading books. Have you guys read those? It's there's stuff in there. It's crazy. And apparently the Earth's on fire, and so I definitely wanted to be involved in helping reverse climate change. Eventually, I saw a presentation by a guy named John Wick who said, you move cattle in circles. I mean, the short version, you move cattle in circles and then you sequester carbon. I was like, man, that sounds awesome. I want to do that. So I did what anyone would do. I started calling all the ranches around Marin and Sonoma and said, hey, I don't have any ranching experience, but I do have farming experience. I'm not very helpful. I'm a slow learner. I'm moderately competent, but I have a lot of ideas that I read in books. Would you like to hire me? Also, I can help you reverse climate change. And nobody said yes for whatever reason. And eventually I gave up. There's actually a couple people that said no in this room. Guido, I don't know where you're at.
He said no to me too.
Is he right there? Yeah. Guido, that's right. Call him out. Evil man.
You're on the stage now.
On the stage. It's real talk, Guido. But eventually, my mother-in-law found a job for me on a ranch. I'm sure she was not motivated by the fact that I was living unemployed in a trailer in the back of her house with her daughter at the time. Apparently, she was more motivated than me, and found me a job on a ranch, which led to another ranch where I was managing things that were too complicated for me. And I definitely used a lot of tools from holistic management, and then I sent myself to the Ranching for Profit school with my wife, and that was definitely a turning point for me. And now I'm at Sonoma Mountain Institute, moving cattle in circles, hoping it goes well.
So you actually just covered your origin story, so I want to let everybody else tell, maybe as colorful, maybe not, as your origin story of, like, how did you get where you are, but, like, more focusing on how you got started and how you thought about, was the structure that you thought you were going to start with, where you ended up in those first years?
Okay, I feel like I'm still too close to my origin story to have much perspective, but I can, I won't go too deep into the pre-ruminant years, the dark time. Just kidding. I like monogastrics too. It's fine. But I started farming at 16, and I was a unschooled, homeschooled kid in rural North Carolina where I grew up. and started going to community college and joined an ecology club and met a farm that needed some volunteer help. And so I started volunteering, and then they hired me, and that was sort of the catalyst for my entry into the idea of sustainable food, because at the time I didn't know that farming wasn't inherently sustainable, and then Michael Pollan told me otherwise, and I was like, there's work to do. And then my kind of career trajectory thus far, pretty similar to Byron. I moved to Sonoma County for, end of 2014. I moved to California about 6 months prior, and then moved to Sonoma County into 2014. Didn't know anybody. I don't think I even knew that. Like wine grapes were a big deal in California. I mean, like I said, I was pretty homeschooled, but I was excited about these vague possibilities. I also saw a John Wick talk, ruiner of lives. But I sent out a bunch of emails I sent out an email to Richard King, who is here with us today, who has done so much for so many people's careers and understandings. And yeah, I was like, for real, Richard is awesome. Richard, I know you won't stand up, but put your hand up if you're out there. There he is. Richard's the best. And talk about a holistic thinker. That would be Richard. I sent Richard an email after I heard him speak, and because I think what I was looking for was just, can I be like an ecologically minded person and work in agriculture in a way that's not just mitigating damage? Like, that's what I was after. So Richard put me in touch with a gentleman with some cattle at Pepperwood Preserve, and Pepperwood Preserve managers are here today. There's Devin, and Michael, I think, is here somewhere. And so I moved to Pepperwood Preserve into a rundown camper. The cow camps I live in now are amazing compared to when I was in there. And lived there and grazed there, just going out on foot or on ATV for 2.5 years. And it was sort of a quasi-apprenticeship that shifted into a management job, and we were trying to figure it out as we went. But cutting my teeth grazing cattle on a nature preserve was an incredible context, and I feel really privileged to have been able to start in that place. And I had a lot of autonomy, formed really close relationships down to specific animals, and learned a lot about stockmanship by just working on foot and working alone and independently. Learned about plumbing and water, and how to be resourceful, and Michael, I don't know if Devin, is Michael in here, or has he stepped out? But that man has been with me through some highs and lows, when it's 1 a.m. and you're still trying to put cows back, and you have to realize it's time to go to bed and do it again in the morning. You can form tight bonds with people in those situations, as we've probably all been there. Anywho, in order to sort of make a living, I formed a small grass-fed beef brand, very small, that I called Circle A Beef. And so I basically trade. Please don't tell the employment law people, whoever enforces that, they don't need to know about this. But I basically traded my work for live animals, which I then finished and harvested and packaged and branded and sold. And Guido and a lot of other folks here were extremely helpful to me in that situation, and I'm very grateful for my customers and my community. And then I started working for Freestone Ranch. Misty, are you still here? Misty, John and Misty Gay, managing cattle on a couple of their ranches and out here near the coast, and learned a lot there, and was throughout that mentored by Spencer Smith and Kent Reeves and others in holistic plan grazing, and took all the courses. And that's something, without getting too much into the interpretive narrative, the ability to practice this stuff on a small scale with a lot of autonomy is something that's been a huge privilege of mine, that I realize on larger ranching operations isn't really feasible. So that's kind of the last thing I was doing before I left Sonoma County, and and move to New Mexico. Is that kind of cool?
Holly, do you want to catch us up on what your work structure, business structures are like now?
Sure. So before we made the move, it was my husband and I. I could run every piece of equipment, and we just worked back and forth. We had a couple guys that helped us. And when we made our move then, now it's changed because it's two brothers that we're working into their operation for. And we still own some land back where we still own and we still rent some land back where we came from. And so that's kind of nice because that's kind of turned into kind of our test plot kind of stuff. So we'll kind of have a harebrained idea that we want to pitch to these guys. And then we'll use that land to try it out on because it's only 70 miles difference, but holy maloney, it is like different worlds. And so if it'll work there, it certainly will work where we're at now. And so I guess that's a little bit kind of the structure. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about your business structure. I want to pass it over to Dee Dee, but also start to move into like the people dynamics of starting out, because that's a thread that is common. I mean, I hope young folks in the audience are like, there's no one way to get started, and also like Daniel and Alejandro said, like just start. Maybe get your mother-in-law to help you find a job. Yeah.
Or my mother-in-law.
But like some of those early bumps in the road, and like the people part of it is so important. When we talk about structuring the business, it's not just like what's gonna work on a spreadsheet, right? It's who are you partnered with.
So a little bit more on the people. I'm picking up what you're putting down. So we knew these people that we moved to. We had fed cattle for them for 10 years. And so in custom graze, we'd just done a lot of different things with these people. So that's how we had worked into it with these people. And honestly, it completely fell in our lap. We were taking care of some of their cattle. And we called them to say, hey, here's what's going on in our world, and we're going to be transparent with you. And you're probably going to need to move your cattle by this day. And they said, okay, I'm going to call you back in a couple hours. And so they called us back a couple hours, and they said, hey, somebody that is very well off and is a really good business person once told me that you have good people, and they need a home, you make a home for them. If you don't have a spot for them, you make a spot for them because you don't run across good people every day. And so that's what we want to do for you guys. Are you game? And so we said, let's talk a little bit more about this. And so that's kind of how the people thing, I guess, structured into ours. It was they just had pitched it to us. So.
Okay. So let's see about. How far back do I go? Well, okay, I stumbled into farming through woofing. Like I was kind of more like the hippie road than like the regenerative road. And then eventually the two came together. Lived in San Francisco for a while and then traveled through woofing a couple times. And then got a job working on a farm in Pescadero. And then ended up working on a few different farms there, working with animals, kind of doing different operations. And there's some land, a bunch of land owned by land trusts in our area, and this particular piece had been operated by an organic farm, and their partnership split up and they moved, and so the land trust sent out a request for proposals to the greater community. Here's this 62-acre piece of land. What are you going to do with it? Write a proposal and tell us how you'll use it. And then they had maybe like 5 or 6 local farmer panel to read each one and see how possible each one was. And at that time, it was myself and 3 other people came together. We were going to start this really amazing, very complicated farm together. And wrote an amazing proposal and a very beautiful photo montage, and we were selected. And so that's how we got on this particular piece of land. And during that process, it kind of whittled down to 2 of us. And so myself and this other, my original business partner, kind of looked at each other and were like, "You still in? You still in? Sure." But it was all new. He and I had never worked together. The business was new, the land was new, our partnership was new. So we went into it as a general partnership, but we chose species that would live out their life within a year. If none of this worked out, we would at least, be able to walk away from it and not have a ton of investment after that first year. And that first year was really amazing and trying and horrible and hard. And maybe 6 months into it, we realized that our partnership was not working. And by the end of that first year, that my partner had moved on, and then there was me. And I'm really, really grateful for that experience, because I would not have started it by myself, and having the help of a partner in some kind of way to get it going was amazing. And I think I spent probably at least the whole second year feeling like abandoned and like really stuck in this story of like, how am I going to do this? And then, I don't know, and then had some really great mentors and just people going through similar things that shed some light and really shifted my mentality around it and my emotional, all that baggage. I was like, you know what, I have this amazing, amazing opportunity. And so it was kind of amazing. It started from 4 people and kind of whittled down to 1, but I think that's what it was intended to be. And yes, and let's see, that was 5 years ago now. And so now I'm a sole proprietor. Probably at some point we'll switch to an LLC as well. But yeah, it's amazing looking back. It felt so hard at the time, and like I really didn't know how I was going to make any of it work. And it turns out all those things were just, got me to here, I guess, to this stage.
That resonates a lot with me personally, because when you think, we often don't talk about new farms as startups, but they actually are startups, right? And then just bringing in the startup lens to it, 65% of startups fail because of co-founder breakups. And that's, 90% of them fail in general, and then of those 65 are because of people dynamics. And so it's a normal thing. But it's something that I think we don't talk about enough, and we also don't talk enough about viewing each of you as entrepreneurs. One of the threads that I'm hearing here is, and I'd like you guys to maybe comment on it, is even like we tried to find a panel that was balanced with like different kinds of ways of getting in, and also succession versus new farm, having farming experience, growing up on a farm or not. But given what land prices are today, like the model for how you're going to get into agriculture, even as someone who had land in the family to inherit, you find yourself on a different property now. So actually, like, you're creating a new model, right? Just thoughts about the model for your generation, our generation? Like, what is it going to look like?
I'll offer an observation, which is that I've been really encouraged by this like total groundswell of apprentice programs and internship programs that have nonprofit oversight that have emerged. And I mean, like Kivera's program is at least 12, I think 10 or 12 years old, and there's plenty of graduates here. But there's a lot of others locally and across the country and world. And I think the challenge that's easy to run into if someone's trying to break into agriculture, because like if you're trying to break into an agriculture that is, regenerative agriculture or sustainable, or you get excited about grazing, holistic management, chances are you're coming at it from an idealistic perspective, which is great. And I'm speaking, from on good authority here, just reflecting my own experience. But there are, agriculture throughout time has been riddled with complicated power structures and has been used at times to liberate people and gain sovereignty, and other times to control people and control land. So it's a complicated field, pun intended, that one walks into. And I think something that's been helpful for me has been to take the approach of like mentor diversification. So I'm not putting too much stock in any one person these days. I'm not lending all of my time or my understanding of the world into to one teacher. And I think it used to be a little bit more that way. These days with like the internet and with just how well you can invite people to kind of be witnesses to your life, I think young people have the opportunity to have a lot more resilience and accountability and people looking out for them as they break into this field that maybe used to be the case even like 10 or 15 years ago, if that makes sense.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, right? The power dynamics is really real because you've got a lot of things working against you. Can we just talk about the difficult conversations that you've each navigated in whatever context, whether it's like negotiating leases with landowners or trying to convince people to give you a chance? How have you navigated those?
Can I comment on your before question? Can you say it again, Christine?
Can I? What was it?
It was about
what
getting in,
what is it
right?
going to look like for your generation? Like, what do you?
Sure. So recently, I was asked to talk to young women in science, and they want to expand more into agriculture, right? And these ladies very few of them had any experience in any kind of agriculture, and so on one slide, I said, here's the traditional ways that you get in, right? You're gifted or you're inherited it, or you go into debt for it. But I think a third option, and I think that a lot of our generation is experiencing, is, you're coming up with it on your own, and you're getting these venture capitalists to help build it, these angels to come in and get, you through the first 30, 60 days. But you have to start with an idea, right? You have to start with something because they may want to invest in land, but that's sometimes, challenging and that's a whole nother dynamic. But the real answer, like if we're really going to talk real, before I can tell you the real answer, I need everybody who's like 55 and up to like hold your hands up. Okay, I just want to make sure none of you had any tomatoes in your hand because here's the real talk is that how our generation and the generation that we're raising, it's in your guys' hands that went up now because you're the asset holders. And it's hard to say, and it's a real conversation, right? But I don't think that you guys really understand what you hold. And you have to have a plan. And I don't care if it's a bad plan. Just get a plan. You got to start somewhere. And you have to tell us is the biggest thing. Once you tell us, then we know. Then we can pivot from that point. Because it's either, no, I'm giving it to whoever, or no, there's not a chance, I don't want you here, or whatever it is. Or it's, yeah, I really do want you here, but I just don't know how to make it happen. And so have that conversation. And maybe some of you have had that conversation with your kids and they say, we don't want anything to do with it. Then for the love of Pete, get over the blood. And I have 4 little boys. And so I can say, although my kids aren't as old as your kids are, I can slightly put a toe in your boot and start to walk a little bit and feel the heartbreak that if my boys didn't want a part of agriculture, how hard that would be. But give one of us a chance. There's so many of us out there that we're willing to do the 1 a.m. locking the cattle up. We're willing to do the whatever, all-nighters on checking cows or heifers or whatever it is, right? There's people our age that are willing to do it, but you gotta have the guts to see the power that you have and help us from there, I guess. So to your answer, the next generation depends on you guys.
Thoughts? No, that was it. I completely got you off track. More thought that was it.
Well, in answer to that question, I feel like I kind of want to pivot off what Holly said a little bit because while I did tell my origin story, part of that is that I am an employee. I have my own business, but also I am an employee. It is awesome to be an employee. I'm just throwing that out there because I feel like the question also presupposes that we need to own our own operation. Why the hell do you want to do that?
That's really hard.
Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a good idea. No offense to everyone that owns their own operation. I have my own business, but it is a hard business to be in. And the margin for error is very thin. The margins are very small. You're competing against people that have regional advantages in their area. I mean, you can live in a certain area and say, I want to run a cow-calf, but you're still competing with market forces that are structured nationally where people do have regional competitive advantages. And so I feel like that's related because I think it's easy. I know I felt that way where I want my own operation, and I think it's inherent that we all want our own land base and we want autonomy and we want the creativity that comes with creating that operation so that we can have it reflect our values. That being said, I feel like for me, the way to get in is to be an employee, be a good manager, do the best I can, and have a business on the side that doesn't have to pay for my baby's new pair of organic shoes, which are pretty expensive. Like, I don't know if you've been baby shoe shopping lately, but the baby shoes are expensive if they're not made out of cancer-causing chemicals and flame retardants. So that's where like the salary portion goes, and then I still get to meet that need of creativity on the side by essentially running my own operation. And so I think it ties in with what Holly said, because there are a lot of people with operations and they have they have need as well, because it's hard to be on a horse when you're 55 or on an ATV for 8 hours a day, and we want to be part of that solution. And I just want to like put a little slip in the hat for being an employee, because I think it's awesome. Yeah.
And full disclosure on that ours is structured very similar to Byron, exactly how you described. And hey, talk about putting a little thing in the hat. The movie last night, I got to watch the very, very tail end. But I would just like to send out a huge hug to that couple and for putting themselves out there and saying, hey, it doesn't need to be our kids, just somebody that really cares about it too. That was amazing. And yeah, they really did.
Deborah Clark.
And Byron, when you talk about kids and being an employee, that is a huge thing that if the asset holders are considering structuring it in a way like Byron or that I experience, one thing that is a huge selling point to us was that our kids can come with. Because one thing that we worried about was, we felt not only did we feel extreme failure from letting our family down, our family business, because the land has been in our family, or my husband's family, for years and years and years, but it was just the dysfunction just became to such a level that it was not okay. And so, which in California, you guys will understand this. So somebody sent me this quote. It said that family dysfunction in agriculture is like a forest fire. It just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling down the hill until one day somebody comes by and creates a fire line. And so I call my husband and I like the bulldozer, right? Like we just bulldozed through it, and we just created that fire line to stop the fire from running down. But with that, we also understood that we're stopping some values and some morals that we hold so dear to our heart from rolling down the line to our children. And so that's a key part of where we're at now and how it's structured now, is that our kids get to be a part of it, and they get to come with. They, ride the tractor with dad. They do whatever we do, they get to do with. Now, they're a little bit faster paced, so it looks a little bit different than what it would look like if it was 100% us, but they still get to be a part of it and still get to keep some of those core values. That's a huge part.
I really appreciate the truth telling here, and this is why we want this panel to be on the main stage, right? Because there's words to tell. All of us are in this together, right? And there's conversations that need to be had, and intergenerational translation of how those conversations should be had. 3 of the 4 of you are now in your own intergenerational journey. Actually, just a baby cried just now, and like 3 of you were like, that one's mine.
Phantom baby pain.
So the question I want to ask is now, thinking about the ancestors you want to be, and the kind of, when you're in 55 and above shoes, how has starting a family changed your dynamics, and how are you thinking about your mission, your work, your life? Because in ag, those things are so intertwined.
That was my baby crying, just to clarify. I hope she's okay, because they ran out of the room. Yeah, so I think it's changed everything. I think it's given me perspective in a different way, and I think motivation too. I guess I feel so much more motivated to make my business succeed, so that my kid, and if we have more, can grow up where we live and grow up, you know, being plopped down in chicken coop or like in with the piglets or, you know, eating grass or whatever, just outside. And that feels really important. And so in order for that to happen, this farm, this business needs to succeed. And although I wanted that to happen beforehand, I feel more committed to it in a new way. And the perspective it's also given, yeah, I feel like time is just doesn't exist. There's just not enough time. I mean, I felt that before, but I'm a new parent as of like a year ago, and so I just feel like all I want to do is hang out with her, but I also have to work all the time, and so how do all those things come together? And I think for the most part, it's made me let go of a lot of things that don't make sense or that maybe do make sense, but I don't have time for. And I'm sorry if I haven't responded to your email. But like, I mean, there's just things that you just like, you can't do. There's just like not enough time. And like silly things that we were doing that just weren't actually either improving the business or improving animal health or, you know, putting weight on, like the animals. It's good to clarify. So, yeah, I think it's been the most amazing trip, but it's also, you know, being her parent is the best thing, but like being a business owner and a parent, that's the part that's hard, is combining the things, not being the parent part. And yeah, I feel like days I dream of being an employee, like going to work and then like turning it off afterwards and like going home, and a lot of days that feels really, really appealing. And then there's the days where my kid's like covered in poop and like eating grass, and it's like, oh yeah, that's really great too. She's okay, they just came back in.
Oh, no, I didn't have anything. Sorry, you just said poop and grass, and I was just clarifying, like cow poop or chicken poop or her own poop.
Who's
just poop.
poop?
Who's poop?
Yeah.
We never know.
Yeah. Yeah. The question being, how have the kids changed the business? Yeah. Well, I really think about wearing a helmet when I ride an ATV a lot now. I mean, that's one of the honest answers. I think, you know, having the kid is definitely, like Dee Dee said, being a parent's the best thing. It's the best job. I didn't know until I became it. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of parents in here. I'm guessing probably half the audience or maybe more, and you don't know until you have a kid, and then you're like, holy smokes, that's the most important thing. Like, few things matter as much. So, you know, part of that is being there for her, and that means being intact. So, you know, it definitely, like, you know, doing less dangerous stuff, maybe standing outside of the bud box when that one steer decided it wants to behave like that, instead of thinking like getting kicked won't hurt that bad. It changes the safety component. But the other thing is that I'm sure it's similar for a lot of people on this panel, that there's a period in your life, and maybe you're still in it or maybe you'll have it forever, where you're extremely motivated to further your career and grow that part of your business. It's like the most important thing to the exclusion of all others. And for me, having my daughter, it definitely flipped that switch where, oh, not screwing her up is the most important thing. And being a parent, while it is intuitive, there's also learning in that. So instead of, you know, it being books like David Montgomery or Alan Savory or whatever it is, now it's like how not to screw up your kid in 3 easy steps, you know, on the nightstand. So I think that changes as well. And Dee Dee, I feel that same pull. Like, I leave in the morning and she's not up most of the time, and then I come home at the end of the day, and I missed all these hours. And eventually I'll be able to strap, like ratchet strap her on the ATV and like cover and bubble wrap, and she can come, and that'll be cool. But until then, it definitely pulls my heart apart. Like today when I left, she was up, and it's like she kisses the glass on the door, and she's 14 months, and it's just, and you're like, yeah, that's the most, I'm coming back in, screw this. Let's hang out. It's time to play blocks, so.
This would be the part where I definitely feel like I should have been one of the people that raised my hands, right? Out to pasture again. So like I said, we have 4 little boys, 6, 4, 2, and then 3-month-old. Thank you, Lori, for holding him. So the baby number 1, we were still at the operation. So it wasn't until it wasn't until we had baby number 3. Baby number 3 was just about 1 year old when we started to kind of unravel our business and move. So baby number 1 just got packed up. I left the bubble wrap, but I did duct tape him in the car seat, right? So baby number 1 just got packed with. Yep, it was, completely. Baby number 2, then I was a little bit more in offense. Zone defense, sorry, not offense. I was in zone defense a little bit more with them. But Dad didn't feel quite ready to take a 2-year-old with him, and so we had 2 with Mom, and that worked for a little while. And then I said, Dad, you're going to cowboy up and you're going to take 1. So that worked well for a while. And then we were blessed with number 3, and then it was constant zone defense. And they went with a lot. But Mom also reprioritized too. And so then that's where we had added some people by that time. And then it was, okay, Mom, your skills really lie in the financial, in the marketing, in that part of our business. You can do herd health. You can come out. I still took care of all of our cattle in that way. So, but you need to tell people what to do instead of just doing it yourself. And so that changed our business in that capacity. Baby number 4 ran us over, which is good. But I can say from now the opposite side of the fence of being an employee and having your own business and that kind of aspect to the people who raised your hands, to not forget. It's like there's some generation time frame in there where it's like there's this thought that percolates in your head that your kids were perfect. And so when our 3 little boys come and like run over, there's that kids should be seen and not heard. It's like, they're boys. They're going to get a stick and somebody's going to be crying in 2 minutes, And so I would just challenge the asset holders, the whatever age and stage you're at, for the people who haven't had kids too, to be real. Like, we all were kids, and I know all of us had halos, right? But to remember that they're kids, and it's so important to bring them with because we're showing them how to be people, how we're domesticating them, especially when they're boys, And so I think that's a part that's really changed us, I guess, and how our business kind of morphed over kids 1 through 4.
The reason why I spent so much time on this question, I want to open up to Ariel as well, is because it is a holistic context doing this work. And bringing that context in is really important because it is often, I just see burnout so much across the producers that we're working with. And whether it's during starting a family or pre-starting a family or even putting it off because your life already feels like so extractive that it's not possible to even fit in one more thing. So I just would ask about what you would tell the audience about how to make you successful or how to help folks like you in the next generation be successful in that holistic definition. What do you want folks to know? What do you want the community to know? How can we support you?
Can I go to the burnout part?
Do whatever part you want.
Sure. All right. So I'm going to pick apart the burnout part. I think that was something that my husband and I, he was completely oblivious to it. I can say that because I can throw him under the bus because he's not here, right? Like, but he'll admit it. He was very oblivious to how close to burnout he was. It wasn't until he had vertigo for 2 months that he just realized, wow, like I'm internalizing a lot of this stress. We were in the middle of bean harvest, and here I am with a nursing baby going to the hospital at night to be with him and take care of him, and during the day I would go out and kind of organize people, take care of the cattle, get the combine rolling, that kind of thing. And so it was good. I realized, like, the cape doesn't flap, and it's really not there. Like, I have my limits too. And he realized that, wow, we got to change something here. And so it wasn't until we became part employee, part business owner type situation, that just the other night he said, wow, I didn't realize how much I didn't see my kids. It's like, yeah, I've been saying that, dude, but nobody listened, right? And so it's always different when you realize it yourself, or when it comes from a wife or whatever. And so to the asset holders, or in whatever capacity you are, please help us, younger generation, make that space, because Christine, like you said, like, at this point, we got the fire in our belly, and just because we have kids, that fire doesn't leave, but we're trying to figure out how to balance the fire with the kids. And so you guys, having walked the miles in front of us, help us not make some of the same mistakes that you might have made by overworking it or whatever, or give us that in to help us balance that, because that's what's going to bring the kids back to the operation and keep the holistic idea going, because they're going to see it, they're going to live it, and they're going to love it because they loved it with us, instead of being told to sit down and shut up, or whatever it is, or we just work all the time, we don't get to play, because there's so many other things in this world that will pull our children away from the operation.
Oh, that's a big question. So I'll speak from the perspective of, young first-gen agrarian, that whole deal. I don't have kids yet. I have 7 dogs. If anybody wants any dogs, let me know. 7, a lot of dogs, a lot of horses, and I've been so the place that I've been personally is, transitioning from this, my community here in Sonoma County, a lot of whom are here, of sort of this very ecologically aspirational, deeply committed to our principles kind of scene, trying to make a go in this place that's rapidly gentrifying, that whole sort of righteous struggle to, living and working on 100,000 acre Apache reservation in New Mexico, and working in the context of, commodity beef and commercial cattle. And which is someone who got into this work coming from this, core ecological restoration motivation and sort of working from first principles. It's interesting to then be in the position of trying to sustain myself and do the work that I want to do on the land with these tools, and sort of aspects of our economy that are not in any way a literal translation of my values, right? So, I guess, if we're doing the real talk thing, I've increasingly felt like a lot of the regenerative agriculture scene has a bit of an attitude problem, frankly, about those of us who are trying to make a go on areas of low rainfall and difficult social dynamics, complicated lease structures, who can't necessarily direct market our beef, or if we can, it's just a tiny fraction of it. And by attitude problem, I just mean, I think that we need to be really careful, if we're aspiring to be holistic thinkers, to consider the constraints that everyone is working within and work to try to remove those constraints, rather than talking about everything we're doing right without mentioning what the constraints are. Because that paints a really false narrative about where we can go. And I feel like in some ways I was kind of sold a bad bill of goods when I bought into the grazing thing. And now I'm realizing how hard it is to follow your values, make a living, make the land better, treat animals like individuals, et cetera, like do all these things. It's like pick two, you know. So I guess if I ever request to the community, if that's kind of what the question is, it's just to, like, I think that it'd be something like, let's have a sense of where we want to go in agriculture, but have a lot of graciousness for those of us who are trying to find our way, and pragmatism about what the specific barriers are so we can actually remove them. Because if we say like, oh, it's easy or it's simple, when we know it's not, and we feel like we have to say that to sell beef or to get investors, that maybe that's elevating our individual businesses, but it's compromising everyone else. And I think, like, I want to live in a world where I can make a living in this work and sell beef or produce animals and have partnerships in this work based on the work that I'm doing on the landscape, not because I'm solving real problems that people understand, because we're thinking about those problems in a complex way, not by recapitulating an oversimplified linear description of the world, if that makes sense. So that's a little bit preachy, I admit, but the request is just to try to join me in that and support me in that and support other people who are having to maybe dive into the commodity system, not because we love loading our animals onto on a truck every fall and sending them off to who knows where, but because we're trying to honor as many values as we can, and we can't check all the boxes all the time.
Transparency.
Yeah. So I think the first piece is simpler, and it's just a request for investment in us. It's hard to learn how to do things. I mean, there's a host of things I still can't do that I don't want to talk about. That I'm like, it'd be really nice if someone showed me how to do X, Y, and Z. And I've definitely been there, Ariel, out in the field at 1 a.m. trying to fix a plumbing issue. And the water's cold and you're cursing and you've got a headlamp and like no one showed me how to do it right. I like taught myself how to ride an ATV. No one ever showed me. The first person that showed me how to ride an ATV said, just hang off the front of the ATV when we go over here. I'm like, I don't feel like I should sit on the very front of the ATV while we go 5 miles. And he was like, you'll be fine. So that was kind of my intro and training. But I think investing in things that can help us become better. An example, I kind of plugged it before, but it's definitely been really impactful for me. Ranching for Profit has been extremely helpful in my learning. So being willing to send us to places like that, I also get it. Like, I'm saying this, I'm making a request, but everybody's busy. It requires energy. Everybody has time. And like through the lens of the community, especially people that have assets, there's a lot of starry-eyed, dreamy people that are in love with the idea of the thing, and they want to come to your place and want to learn. And it's probably hard to, on that end, to sort of weed out who are the people that are actually going to work hard and who are the people that just are in love with the idea. So I also realize that's an onus on you, and it's not easy. But still, if you can find those people, invest in them. And the second thing I would say is that, I've definitely had to work hard. I've dealt with a fair amount of rejection. Guido, you're on a spreadsheet of people that rejected me. It's like 42 people that I called in Marin and Sonoma County trying to get a job on a ranch. So you're not alone. There's like 41 other people on that spreadsheet. But I've also been given a lot of opportunities, and I just want to name that's, I am a white cis male from a middle class family, and I look like a lot of the people that have the assets, and I can have conversations with them, and I am given a lot of opportunities as a result of that. I learned how to talk to those folks over dinner tables at my friends' houses, and there's a lot of people that don't look like me that would probably be way better employees or way better managers, and giving them a shot as well, because I strongly feel like if we're going to succeed, it's going to take a diversity of ideas, and that's going to come from a diversity of people. So it's the investment component, but it's also that investing in others that don't look like us, which I also requires a large amount of energy, and I get it, but maybe just you just see how far you can push that edge.
We have half an hour left. Is that right, Leslie? Okay. Do you have any requests of the community?
I think that you guys did a great job covering that one. It's such a broad question, but I think that I could echo a lot of what Ariel said, and I think that in general, just feeling like we're all in this together is something that I don't always feel, and I think especially as like new people and newer people coming up, there sometimes can feel like this is my thing and I don't necessarily want to share it, but we're all this like tiny piece of this movement, and in order for us to succeed and in order for all the people behind us, that we got to share, and we got to have that mentality that we are in this together. I feel like I've seen that, and it's a struggle, because I know when you build something from the ground up, it's like this baby, and we all feel very very protective of it, and similarly, like there's not going to be new people doing that if we can't open up a little bit and feel like there's that this is a bigger family, and there's so much more to learn. There's so much more people to there's so much education that needs to happen to consumers that it's going to take a lot of people, and in order for all those new and young and excited and energized people to learn, and myself included, I agree with you that I wish I could like be an apprentice sometimes, because I feel like there's all these things I don't know how to do. But that to take in those people and teach them, because there's so much to learn, there's so much to know.
Can I clarify him? So off of Byron, the investment is a huge part of it, and I think not only invest in us, but invest in yourselves as asset holders too. For example, like when my husband and I, when it was just us, just on our operation, right? One of our goals was to be lifelong learners, right? And don't stop learning unless you're dead was our theory. And so we went to so many conferences a year, read books, or we push each other that way, and to grow not only in our production and our operation, but also inside. And at the operation that we're at now, they're struggling to employ that philosophy. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. They nail it on production. There isn't a step that's wasted on that place, and so that has been amazing to be a part of. But they're grappling with that investment of like ranching for profit, or they're grappling with the human resources part. They're grappling with, it's kind of always been my brother and me, and my dad and uncle when we needed them, and so we kind of don't need meetings, No, we need meetings. We've got it. Byron, feeling the pain, huh? Right? It's a foreign concept to them but they forgot that, now it's my brother and me and our families, but we've brought in another family who didn't come from the same uterus, and so they don't have the same ESP, and so they can't read our mind to know when we're going to do X, X, and X, right? And so it creates a huge problem in our family, because I have a lot of respect for the operation. I mean, it's a huge opportunity that we're blessed with, and I'm not shy to that. And so I have this respect that, I'm not going to plan Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, this was just one example. This Thanksgiving was quite a learning opportunity, because my family wanted to come down to us for Thanksgiving, and I'm waiting to find out whose turn is it to do chores that day, right? And it wasn't until Thanksgiving morning that we had a plan for Thanksgiving dinner. Slightly stressful when you are super pregnant with 3 little boys, and then you find out you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner, right? And so to the asset holders, don't be shy to invest in yourself, because that investment will exponentially pay to us, because you're teaching us how to employ the best in business practices too. And to our generation, invest in yourself too, like you said. So before I came, I sat the head honcho down and I said, I got some questions for you. I said, you know, we're all young up here, but I want to know your side of the table. I want to know what went through your head when you brought us on, and what did you have to overcome? Because we're not blood, and what went through your guys' minds, you know? And he talked about, you know, the good people and the yada yada, but he also talked about how we were the same consistent people. Every time he dealt with us, every time he saw us, we were the same consistent people. And so to your point about the asset holders have some starry-eyed people come through their trail and whatnot, absolutely. And so to our generation, to separate ourselves out from the starry-eyed people to the real deal, know yourself inside and out and be solid in who you are, because you're going to tell the asset holders you are consistently this person day in and day out through the highs and through the lows. And so I would say invest in yourself, older generation, and to the younger generation, work hard to know yourself and be that person.
That's actually perfect, because I was going to ask us to close out with, how would you speak to our generation in the community? And then I want to leave at least 15 minutes for questions. So advice to...
Oh, can I add one little request, which is one that I feel like a lot of this is pointing to, which is just that it'd be really helpful if the community, which we are, would check in on our partnerships, our marriages, romantic partnerships, business partnerships. Ask us how we're doing so that we don't have to go to our friends and family and community when there's a problem. Because as I'm sure many of you know, if you work with your partner, it's hard to have a healthy, growing, viable romantic partnership that you're working with. It's really hard. And there's this kind of, at least in some geographic regions that I've been in farming and ranching, it's considered kind of rude to talk about, but it's like, please risk being rude. I invite that personally, and I would love a culture that was a little more direct and mutually accountable in that way. So message to younger generation, can we come back to me? Check my notes.
Well, I wasn't ready to talk. I'm going to have to think about it for a second.
All right, you can. I'll softball a bit. Like, what resources did you lean on? You talked about Ranching for Profit. Like, what podcasts do you listen to? What books do you read?
Yep. Yeah, I started to read books. We talked about that. Yep, I read 2 or 3. So resources. I mean, I say the first thing is be humble. Actually, like before you get educated, just be humble. I know it's easy to get excited with ideas and think that those ideas are going to work the way you think they're going to work in the field, but there is a severe theory-practice gap in my experience. Or also, I'm just not that good at it. But there's like, you know, it's a combination of things, but I think one of the most important things is, and I feel like this, you know, this ties in with what Holly said, but it's be humble, be consistent, and take ownership over your own experience. I mean, there's infinite ways to look at the world, and it is all different ways and the same way at the same time. But I just would never want to encourage anyone to look at the situation and say, oh, well, there's people with assets, and I don't have those assets. I don't have an opportunity. Don't let that spiral. There's so many opportunities, and there's so many people that need help. So I think the first component is humility. The second component is understanding that there are infinite opportunities, but it might require 42 rejections and you know, an amazing mother-in-law. And then in terms of practical, technical advice, I'd say, yeah, I mean, I plugged Ranching for Profit. Holistic Management is also great. And I mean, and working with as many mentors as you can get your hands on. I mean, there's a number of people in here who have helped me a lot. I don't want to call them all out, but I mean, I call Joe Morris probably once a week with a story of something I did that was really stupid, and he listens to it and tells me, you know, a time when he did something that he wasn't excited about. And I've called Henry Giacomini a number of times, who's in here, and I call Lauren Poncha, and I mean I probably am on the phone with someone that knows a lot more than me almost twice a week, because I'm always trying to see, like, is this normal? Should they be losing weight? Is this a problem? Do you think they're wormy? And so I think building those relationships and making sure they're two-way and you're invested is definitely helpful. So I'd say that's the kit and caboodle for me.
Pretty much going to say the same thing, only different. I think advice for younger generation, and things that I've had struggle with as a business owner is, this is hard. Like, this work is hard. It's going to be hard, and you're going to have to work hard. And so knowing that before you maybe start on this path is good to know. I think that there is a lot of the starry-eyed, like, I love animals, I love, well-raised meat, and there's a new desire for it, and so there's a lot of excitement around it, but there's not always the practical thoughts about what it actually takes to create that. And I think I've seen that with some younger folks, just like, being really starry-eyed, but not necessarily like understanding what it's like to have your boots on the ground and be up at 1 a.m. and
You mentioned
fixing pipe
business skills when we prepped for this.
Yes, and right. And so, and we've also talked about up here about, the importance of being an employee. That might actually be great. But if you are going to start your own operation, understanding that it's a business, and it is also more than that. It's our lives. It's everything. But if the business doesn't succeed, nothing else succeeds with it. So understanding that having business skills or anything involving that is a huge part. I mean, that's what I spend all my time doing, is thinking about the business and making sure the business itself is going to make enough money to do these things. Like, that's the simple piece of it. But I know I got into this not understanding how much was needed in that department. So I definitely, that's a big piece. And as far as resources that have been incredibly helpful to me, it's basically exactly what you said. It's humans. It's people that have been doing this for a lot longer than I have and know a lot more than I do. And you have a much better perspective that I'm constantly calling or texting, usually because I don't have good reception. But just reaching out to people. I don't read a lot of books right now, except The Little Blue Truck. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. We're gonna have a reading of that later. But talking to people. I mean, when I feel like I'm driving a lot, as a rancher, in the car a lot. So I use that time to call different mentors and different people that are doing similar things, and that's been a huge piece. Even just the emotional support of God, this sucks right now, and this thing, and they're like, this predator got in, or whatever it is. Having that is huge. So building those relationships, it's all about relationships for me. I mean, my business is 100% based on relationships. So yeah.
I'll be quick. One that comes to mind right now, just because my knee is aching after sitting here for an hour or so, is physically taking care of our bodies is really important. And I think there's been a sort of an emerging self-care perspective in farming and ranching that's really valuable. But I'm at the age now where the injuries that I get from working with big animals in a fast-paced environment don't go away, turns out. It's not 6 weeks later and I'm totally fine anymore. So that's catching up. And so taking good care of our physical bodies, cultivating a wide network of mentors, as I said, so that we're not kind of beholden to anyone, be in relationship and be accountable to everyone, but sort of to insulate and diversify the voices that we're listening to. Let's see. I think I liked what Byron said about humility, and it's been helpful for me to remind myself that humility isn't like this virtue. I'm trying to be humble. It's like an actual practice. It's an approach, and it's a way of walking with animals. It's a way of keeping space for the unknown open so that ideas can percolate, so that we can be told we're wrong. It's, keeping space that our ego is not allowed to encroach on is definitely pays dividends. And I think for me, it's been helpful from sort of more of a pragmatic economic perspective. It's been helpful for me to be really thoughtful about what do I think a rancher is? Like, what is this archetype of being a rancher that's motivating my sense of legitimacy? Because I'm one of those who I just think, man, if I was only like on a horse 3 days this week, or only in the field, 30 hours this week instead of 70, I'm not legitimate. And that's a really not very helpful and not very practical or sustainable perspective to have. So I think just being as self-aware as we can, to your point, kind of investing in ourselves in that way, because I like this quote that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we will call it fate. And Carl Jung, for anybody who's in and that's really, I think, a goal of holistic management, is to make the unconscious conscious. And I think it's an individual pursuit, but it's helpful when we do it with our community too.
What do you lean on? What resources do you lean on?
Well, I think, to put a bow on that, we all pretty much say people. One thing with people, so when my husband and I first got together, his brother had very different activities employed after hours, if you know what I mean. And so there was a lot of difference in the kinds of people that we would find hanging around. And so, the saying about if you're with turkeys, you're going to be a turkey. If you just want to soar with the eagles, right? So I would say to resonate, absolutely, the people are my resource. But make sure they're eagles, just be aware, because whatever you tolerate, you're going to tolerate more of over and over, right? And so make sure you're tolerating something that is pushing you much, much harder. You shouldn't be with people who aren't eagles, I guess, is my resource. And don't read the magazines, I guess, is my thought, because it seems like what's in the magazines is beyond yesterday. Like I was kind of an 80s kid, so it's like, it was so yesterday, right? No, it's beyond yesterday now. It's just regurgitating things over and over. There's no fresh ideas. Find the eagles, get out of the magazines, get a book, get somebody that pushes you.
Let's give it up for our panel.